What's up? This is the Solo Monk Show, episode 22, with Warren Tidwell.
Cool. Well, um, as I wrote in a message to you before, I'm pretty fired up. I stay fired up. It's hard not to in this society. I feel like you've gotten to a place in the Western world with the way you see it and think about it that I'm trying to get to. Right.
Yeah.
Like for me, I've been on this journey, and every couple of years, I'm like, wow, I was wrong. I was not doing the work I needed to be doing. I mean, I've shedded I've shed the last vestiges of my liberalism, as it were. But we've been working hometown action here in Alabama. I work with. We've been working with the striking miners over in Brookwood. You did the art that's so awesome. It's up here above me. But anyway, like it is, there are very few opportunities that have come along with this. And what I mean by that is right now, the miners, predominantly working class white guys, even though it is the most diverse local in the country, there's like three locals. And then of course they've self-segregated off into different locals. But regardless, the only support they're seeing are from liberals and leftists. Right? Like that's all they're seeing, and it's blowing their mind. And this strike is into its eighth month. And early on, I could see a lot of them struggling with the fact that, wait a minute, all of these Republicans say that they support coal mining, right? Well, of course they support the coal mine owners. And so I showed up to one of their rallies, and we had raised funds for them. And it was us, unapologetic progressive group in Alabama, NAACP, and Alabama Democrats had made like a $500 donation or something. And I'm like, wow, this is wild. Like, they're seeing the folks doing the work, and it's really, it's challenging their worldview. Well, yesterday, a lot of those miners showed up at the Alabama State Capitol, on the steps of the state capitol, with bullhorns protesting Governor Kay Ivey, Republican, and Republican leadership for their lack of support for the workers, and the fact that state trooper vehicles have been used to escort scabs into the mines, right? We've got folks that are asking, how do I change my party affiliation? We're talking about white, working class, rural voters. So I wrote an article about it. You may have saw it, detailing that work and the opportunity we have of just doing the work and supporting the people. There's a crack in this, right-wing monolith in Alabama, and we damn well better figure out a way to exploit it. We better show up with jackhammers and start doing the work, right? Because I still hold a bit of idealism within me. I've tried to fight it, but it's still there. And so I go to social media, I do what I generally do, and I'm thinking that if I get this article that I've written, and honestly, I was pretty proud of it. I thought it told the story really well. And there's one of the few things that I can do is write and write and to communicate a message. And so basically, since they were tagged in the post, Alabama Democrats liked it and they moved on. This is a golden PR piece that details the fact that they are taking part in this work, that right now there's this opportunity, but yet I get a yawn. And what's going to happen is they're going to continue to sit on the sidelines, look at the rural folks at a distance, and scratch their chins and be like, what's wrong with them? Why do they vote against their own interest? When they're constantly bombarded with one narrative and no competing narrative.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm fired up.
Yeah. I mean, there's really there's nothing in the political structure that addresses anyone's material conditions, And I guess they're afraid it's like a slippery slope thing, where if they start addressing it, then they actually have to look at the whole thing. Start pulling at the yarn, everything falls apart, you know. And
you're exactly right.
And the way everything works is that it works pretty much on belief, because like none of it works for us. Year after year, it kind of gets a little bit worse.
All right. It's very, in Alabama, and I've been doing this work in grassroots organizing, politically, disaster recovery, things like that for a long time. And the thing about disasters that always struck me is class, race, all that goes out the window, right? When your town's been blown to pieces, doesn't matter if you're black, white, rich, poor, whatever, right? People tend to come together. And in those magic moments in the aftermath, right? I hate that disasters occur. And of course, with capitalism and climate change, they're only going to get worse. But there's something that happens in that aftermath where that worship of wealth, their status is gone. And when they only have, people are broken down to their, most basis level, and all they have is each other. Well, I've seen them pull together and do wonderful things. And you're exactly right. I've said it before. The thing is, they don't want to start pulling at those yarns, because I mean, this society, I've paid into this 401k for years. I've got this mortgage, I'm sending my kids to the good schools. I support gay people. I think Black Lives Matter, but that's the point. I'm just going to say it and not do anything else. I'm going to change my Facebook profile picture, right, for social justice.
Yeah, the avatar is the most important thing. It's not about your actual actions.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like we're completely divorced from our actual actions, I guess. I don't know how to put it. Like, everybody has like the second observation profile, and that's like kind of what they see themselves as. Mm-hmm. And what they actually do is just kind of like immaterial, but like that's the actual thing. Right. It seems like that's why everybody struggles with mental health stuff, is that you have to swallow a lot and pretend that everything is something else.
That's it. And we all want to believe that maybe something we're not, that they're high enough on the rungs on the ladder, right? They don't want to go, in their minds, knock down the rungs of the ladder. And right. if they accept
there's a ladder.
Yeah. And if they accept that they're much closer to that bottom rung than the top rung, then we're going to, there's going to be issues. And like you said, that continuing struggle is, I think, I struggle with it, living here, but I have the privilege of doing the work I do and kind of looking at everything from the outside. And people get trapped into that day-to-day existence, right? That survival, that check to check, and so I understand why people have checked out, and understand why people aren't civically engaged. And of course, it's by design at this point, to keep people from that.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to like change everything up a few years ago about how I thought about all of it. Because I used to kind of work on anger or rage, or just being so angry that everything's messed up. But you can't really sustain that. You can't really sustain that.
Right.
So now I switched over to like kind of thinking about capitalism as a spiritual belief, and that everybody's kind of like I said earlier, divorced from their body. So like they become despiritualized. So kind of anything can become a spiritual symbol. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we kind of get fed all these capitalist avatars, and like we project our identity onto what we're consuming, and that becomes like who we are, like our fandom.
Right. And consuming is above all else. I was fortunate enough. My life changed in 2016 and 2017. I was asked to take part in a project in rural Ghana in West Africa, and I was in very isolated part of the savannah where witchcraft allegations still occur. Right. And so they have like 7 camps where, because it's just like Salem, it's weaponized. You have an enemy, but it's generally elderly women who, and some of them 20, 30 years, they're allowed to go to these camps where little more than villages, because they believe that the land takes their power, right? The local beliefs, the land gods, they can't exercise their witchcraft there. So I get there, and the first little bit, of course, is culture shock, and then it starts becoming my new normal. And I'm watching the world news with people from another country in a developing nation in the global South, outside of the United States. And I realized that I've been wrong about 90% of what I feel. And so I had to work through that. Thankfully, I had a few more months within the country, but you talk about the anger. I knew that when I came back, I was going to be angry. I just knew it. I saw somebody complaining about an order at Taco Bell being wrong, right? When I just watched a child dying of hepatitis B, it's completely preventable a week before. It's understandable that having that perspective, it's hard not to be angry. So I call 2018 and 2019 like my angry years, when I came back, just adjusting to this society and reintegrating myself back into this. And I'm still working on that. And I still have a plan. I stay in Alabama for the people who don't have the luxury of leaving. I could leave tomorrow. I've said that before. I had a plan years ago to get the hell out of the South because I was convinced that it was better elsewhere, where everywhere is screwed up. and there are bigots from sea to shining sea, right? And we're seeing that. We saw it 2016, 2020. But I eventually do potentially have, I'm going to have to, for my own mental health, for my own, for my own well-being. I plan on, at least for the next 5 to 7 years doing the work that I'm doing in Alabama, working in rural spaces, trying to bring resources and empower folks in those rural spaces who are not even in between. They're not even in the outside of this existence. They're in another solar system, right? They're completely off the maps of what anyone cares about. So I'm staying here to do that. But after that experience of being in another country outside of here, and existing within that society fulfilled and happy, because the relationships are the most important thing, not the work, not they don't worship wealth. They know that a rising tide lifts all boats, all of that, any of those cliches. And it's been tough, but it's been an education, like just that short amount of time since I've come back to get to where I am now has been just reassessing how I feel about literally everything existing in the United States.
Yeah, I consider consumption kind of like a sickness. People projecting themselves onto these, inanimate things or these abstractions, and giving up themselves for the power that they see in these things.
Right.
And whether it's food or whether it's like, future trash, just
right.
random consumable things,
Collecting, right? I'm a collector. It started when I was younger at thrift stores and with my mom, right? So I started collecting. And then when I was younger, I said, I knew I was going to have a son. I have a 13-year-old son, and I knew I was going to have a son one day. So in my mind, the things I was into, I collected them, started piling them up, right? So I've got all these amazing sports collectibles from the 90s and 80s and back. And of course, he doesn't care anything about them, right? So it was it was, at first it was kind of accepting that. I was like, well, you did all this work. You wanted to have all this cool stuff that your son would want one day. It's totally cool. He doesn't like it, but it's been free, because over the last year, and the pandemic really shifted things too, right? Like I am a manual typewriter, old school typewriter geek, build them, fix them, right? So I had piled up, they take up a lot of space. I'd piled up all these old typewriters, right? I collected, I've got one. I've got a 1949 Royal Grey Magic, and that's it, because I got rid of the others. And all of the yearbooks, all of those things, right? And the interesting thing, and I don't read a lot of theory. I don't read a lot of stuff. I just try to do the work of helping people and being there for people when they need me. Yeah. But it's been interesting how mentally freeing that's been. It's been amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a weird, maybe it's just my artist brain, but I have like a mental breakdown probably like every 5 years or something. And then I just like change something really drastic about my life.
Right.
And I think it was like 2013, I just realized that I had a huge DVD collection, huge book collection.
Right.
I kept having to move, and it was just like I was just carrying around all this shit, just like these boxes of information that I really considered a part of my identity.
Right.
But I mean, it just dawned on me, it's like, how much of this can I remember, and how much of this do I need to pull out to remind myself of who I am or what I think I am?
Exactly.
I was like, I can't possibly be in like this, like thousands of pieces of artifacts or whatever that I have to constantly pull out in self-referential whatever displays of like, hey, here's who I am,
Right.
I started getting rid of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, okay, well, who am I? Why am I collecting all these things? And then, it was a slow process, but it happened,
Very much what I did. And interestingly enough, like I think this is the first time we've ever talked face to face on a video, but communicated through social media and everything. I came across your work, of course, through the Strike Fest poster, and then started reading a lot of things you write. And I appreciate the fact that you create, it seems like, because you feel the need to create, right? It's how you breathe. To me, it's how I see this, right? Like you're prolific in a lot of what you do. And I mean this though, along in the last few months of this journey, a lot of what you've written through the changes you made, right? Getting all of those things and how you write about things have given me a great perspective on, the things that I need to do I need to let go of, right? To see to not be angry because I have perspective that other people don't have, right? And to understand with what I experienced outside of the country and now what I'm experiencing, what while I'm here and while I'm back, um, it's helped my work. It's helped my approach, and I sincerely mean that. And I know you don't do things like that for that reason, but it has. And I'm still trying to figure out meaning in all of this, and wanting to believe. I believe in the power of good folks working together. I've seen it. I've seen it 1,000 times. You can't beat it. There's a TikTok, like a screenshot thing from TikTok that's going around. I don't do it, but it popped up in like my Facebook thing about this guy who had Parkinson's, and he couldn't, the pills were too small. And something made it to TikTok. There was an engineer, a designer who saw that, did a series of designs, right, on the computer, got them to folks who had 3D printers. They made different models of it, figured out which one worked, and then put it online, the designs and everything for free, right, for people to use. That was amazing to me because they solved that one, what would be an insignificant problem, but it was everything to that person. That's what drives me, is seeing the good and decency in humanity when you strip away all of this bullshit that's around us.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big
Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah. I think mutual aid and direct action is like, I think if I hadn't like actually started like hanging out with people who was doing that type of stuff a few years ago, I was like pretty much hopeless.
I'm same thing.
I mean, because it does get to this weird place. I mean, especially in Alabama culture, even like the most leftist people are mostly like liberal thoughts, conservative actions. You know,
That's
and
it.
because of the culture is like so weird here. That's considered kind of left, even if you just hold liberal thoughts.
Yeah, you're just like you're this anomaly.
Yeah.
I'm friends with Drew Morgan, who's one of the three, liberal rednecks. Trey Crowder, of course, went viral a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it was interesting watching the journey they went through, leaving the South, going to places like San Francisco and Seattle, because I used to hold this resentment for where I came from because I had liberal thoughts, right?
Yeah.
But to go along to get along as a straight white man in Alabama, right? Like when I was younger, I acted conservatively.
Yeah.
But it was because I still held this like resentment within me for where I come from and the people. It's like, this people are so backwards. This is ignorant. This, you grow, you learn. And I've had very similar experiences to what Drew and they experienced outside the South, where they would go to Seattle and people would be like, oh, the South, right? Like it's something like awful. And then it caused me it's another reassessment I did of where I come from. And when it comes to my identity, it's so weird that I've gotten older and I apply things that I used to resent and that I kind of look down on to who I am, because it is who I am. It's where I came from, right? Those are my people. I come from coal miners. I come from these rural areas, and I'm very defensive of the fact when people sit back outside of the South and you talk about like projecting their own images onto things. They have ideas of other people, these prejudices and things, and they act through that. And it, of course, just continues to perpetuate the problems and exacerbate the problems we have in the South. So, I mean, I've had people ask me things like, do you have access to a dentist? You know what I mean? And it's like they just don't have this idea. So I think the point I'm trying to make is this, is like, not only does capitalism cause people to think of themselves in a certain way, but of course it portrays other people in a certain way, and it allows people to think that they are somehow better, right? I think it's the song by Chris Christopherson, Jesus Was a Capricorn. Everybody needs somebody to look down on, like that's my theory. That's my studies, right? Like old country music. But
Yeah, well, I think that type of thing is like the meritocracy has to be real, or else none of it's real. It's like if there's no difference between this working poor person and this working poor person,
right?
Aside from like maybe a couple $1,000s or something a year, but
it always trips me out when I say billionaires shouldn't exist on social media, which of course billionaires shouldn't exist. And then like these people who make like, 30, 40 grand a year pop up and say, well, I think billionaires should exist because I want to be a billionaire. And it's like, golly, they're trapped in the lie. You
Yeah.
know, they're just trapped in the lie. But
Yeah, people want to transcend the meat suit, so they want to become like these, spiritual symbols with all this. Like, I mean, like being worth billions of dollars is ridiculous. Like, nobody's worth billions of dollars.
they're
Nobody.
not. And I think the
Not when
experience,
they like, not when people are still out here like trying to get housing. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I think you may have saw, I wrote it as like when people are, they're building dick ships to the top of the sky while people are unhoused and millions, 15 million children, I think, go hungry daily in the United States. In Germany, there is a push by some organization there to, the videos that we used to have in the 80s about starving kids in Africa. Well,
Yeah,
they flipped it around on us, right?
yeah.
Like you can support a child in the United States.
I actually watched a documentary by I guess it's one of the Germany state channels. They did a documentary about poverty in America,
Mm-hmm.
and they were interviewing people who were living in their cars.
Right.
And
We're so propagandized that we don't want to accept that we have the same, problems, some worse than countries that we're supposedly helping. When I was in Ghana, I would tell people, I'm like, we have counties in Alabama who have the same issues that we're dealing with here in the developing nation. And they just didn't want to believe it. They're like, but you're the shining city on the hill. Then I had other Ghanaians while I was there. One told me, I used to want to visit your country. Like, so as a black man, I'm never coming to your country. It's amazing. That perspective, I think the internet, we could have a whole other conversation about it, but the effect that it's had on people's idea of the United States outside of the US, we're like a bad reality show to most of the rest of the world, right? I
yeah,
mean, they're looking at us and they're like, what is wrong? You're the wealthiest country in the history of ever, and you don't have universal health care, and you have people living in cars. Like we are in a lot of ways a failed state, and it's like just a matter of people accepting that
yeah,
and wanting to fix those issues.
yeah. Well, you can tell how fucked up our system is by you have to watch media outside of the United States to see someone interview an actual homeless person. You
Yeah,
know, every time you
yeah.
see them in the fucking media, they're always like some kind of abstraction or like a fucking, animals
Bunch
out
of
here.
tents getting
Yeah,
cleared and people,
yeah. Like it
yeah.
looks like a fucking landfill, which it does usually look like a landfill because
Mhm.
I don't
Well,
know.
I was in DC last month for a climate protest, and I'm staying in a like an Airbnb just a few blocks away from the Capitol, right? In Columbus Circular Square, whatever it is. And there's like tents across the lawn, and then on this corner by where I'm staying, like you have these people living in $1.5 million townhomes, right? Folks in tents across the street, and like they've put fencing up. I don't know what's going on, but I'm like, I can look one direction and I see the U.S. Capitol. I don't even move, and this is 2 blocks. I look to the right, and we've got 15 homeless folks, unhoused people in tents. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like that's the thing is it was just such a commentary on our country, right? Like I was just, if I did a panorama, which I'd forgot to go back and do, you would have seen the Capitol and then of course the tents just a couple of blocks away. And I think that's where my frustration would go back to me being fired up, right? Like the the solutions are not that complex. Okay. To
yeah,
me, they're not that complex. We don't have people talking to each other. We have a vacuum where you and I live that is being filled with radicalism because folks on the left have disinvested from rural spaces. They've written them off. They're not here. And then they want to know why Mo Brooks exists. Like these people are empowered here, but they are completely, they don't see their culpability in the equation.
yeah.
That's where a lot of my frustration comes from. I was going to back up for real quick talking about like symbols and capitalism and all of that. It's been a really weird thing for me with this amplifier.org visionary leader thing I was selected for.
Mm-hmm.
As I've mentioned to you before, I'm the token redneck rural guy in a lot of leftist liberal spaces, and
Yeah,
I've learned to weaponize that a little bit to shine spotlight on the folks who are being erased that I work with. That's a big thing. So me, I mean, 100%. I was a mechanic service advisor at a shop up until 2 years ago before I started doing community organizing exclusively. And And I've got this, as you may have seen, they put out this series of augmented reality posters, right? And this artist, LMNOP, and Shepard Fairey, who did the Hope poster for Obama, did a few of them.
Yeah.
Common, the musician, Patrice Culler. So it's a big thing. And then there's me, right? Like rural Alabama organizer again, once again.
They're like, we need somebody
token.
from
Yeah. But what's so wild about it is I'm in these conversations with them, right? And they're having these like really high-minded thing about how art can change lives and all of that. And I mean, good art makes you think, it inspires you, all of that.
Yeah.
But I'm like, we're not going to hang up enough posters to fix racism, y'all.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't explain to me how I'm going to build power in the rural South and institutional power to change things by having a poster that talks to you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And they're sucking up all kinds of, if this interview gets to them, they're going to kick me out. They're sucking up all kinds of donations and things for what they're doing. And it's good people, well-intentioned people doing this work, but it's like this massive effort that could go to something productive. You know what I mean? And I'm still wrapping my head around what they're trying to do. And again, it goes back to our symbols, right? They want to hold me and these other people up. And granted, I look up to some of the folks I'm with, but like, it's like, look at the awesome work they're doing, and that's great. And maybe it'll shine a spotlight on some of the work we're doing here. But at the same time, I mean, my little boy thinks it's cool. I mean, that's what I get out of it. My kids don't think I'm a dork.
Yeah, I think,
I mean, that's it.
And I know it's not this simple, but for the most part, culture is either a pacifier or it's historicizing something.
Yeah.
And if you're not past the problem and you're creating cultural symbols, then it's probably to pacify, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's a big
if the issues are still there, and it's just like, I mean, like, just why not use all that money and those resources towards the thing as opposed to creating like a artifact or an abstraction or a symbol or something.
The one part of it that I think is productive, and I didn't get it at first, but I understand it a little bit better now, is they're creating a curriculum around each of each of us and the work we're doing. So I worked with this educator in Brooklyn,
Gotcha.
who was brilliant and put together this curriculum that's about, you know, reconnecting with the people around us and our shared humanity, right? Like, there's good ideals and the things that they want to get into these schools with these kids. But I remember when I was exactly, I mean, and they'll go in, but I remember when I was a kid,
they just want to bring in the speaker, open up cans of Coca-Cola.
That's right. And but when I was a kid, like, they'd bring in some curriculum or something, I'd do it just to get through the day, right? We'd have a speaker and I'd be like, woo, I'm missing math. You know what I mean? They want build little automatons. I homeschool my 13-year-old, and I didn't set out to do that because I was a big believer for a long time in public schools, and I stayed in Auburn, Alabama, where I live, because there's a great school system here, or at least by the metrics that they put out. My son was suffering in the school system. He is on the autism spectrum. I don't like the term highly functioning, but that's what they say. And so I think he's beautifully neurodivergent. I love him, but he's not cut out. It's not built for him. He is so wonderfully unique that he's not going to be an automaton, right? He's not going to be a button pusher. And it was like, accepting that was actually like, those kind of things, being a liberal for as long as I was like really tough. Like, I was bought into the system. I was like, if I do these things, if I check these boxes, my child will be successful. I'll build on, you know, I come out of a tiny trailer in, you know, rural Appalachia. And I'm like, I mean, look, what a great story, you know, like I've done this. And then it's like, no, it's not what you want. And it's not what's best for him.
Yeah. I used to think that public schools were good for people because it showed you how unfair the world is. But this is stupid. That's one of those things where, like, if you get beat as a kid, you're like, hey, everybody needs to get hit every once in a while. Like,
right.
No, I don't think so.
I broke that cycle in my family. I mean, my mother did a lot of things right, did a lot of, you know, I'm a big part of the reason who I am is that she taught me critical thinking, and I kept at it. And so, yeah, but you know, I got a whooping every once in a while, as they say here, and I used to say I deserved it because I messed up, but like my son is extremely well behaved, and all I've ever had to do was, calm down and
Mm.
then talk to him and work through healthy consequences for things. You know what I mean? Like, not the immediately, smacking the hell out of them. Like, I mean, we still have corporal punishment in some of our schools here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I got like 12 paddlings while I was in school.
Yeah. Oh, my mouth. Ooh, my mouth got me in trouble so many times.
Yeah.
I told you, if you talk to me, I'm going to take you on a journey. We'll go all over the place
I
with
have,
conversation.
yeah, I think I have issues with authority.
I
And it's
definitely
been
have
that way
issues.
since I was a kid, I just like, if something didn't make sense, I just had to say something about it. I just
Yeah,
like,
oh, absolutely. And I took that into adulthood, and it's kind of like me sitting back now. I'm very much like looking at the Alabama Democrats and these people and being like, this opportunity with this minors, holy crap, this is amazing. You should, take advantage of this. And then the other side of me is just like, why are you wasting your time? But I have to say something. If something doesn't make sense, or if something is there, I do not have the ability to remain silent. I can't do it. And it got me in trouble a lot in high school, especially when my teachers were wrong.
yeah,
I think back to some of the stuff though. I mean, I could have gone about it a little better, but of course my brain was still forming. And
right.
I'm fortunate enough, I say this a lot, that I'll be 43 next week. And I got to this point, I was able to make mistakes. I was able to learn from them. I was able to grow and mature. And I'm extremely grateful for that, because a lot of folks in the system aren't able to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they drop hammers on kids. And perfect example, I think you may have saw where I had written about this, but we had some YouTubers come to my door the other day, about 3 days after Halloween, and I didn't know it. They were filming a trick-or-treating after Halloween video, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they scared my son. Assumes danger in everything. It's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things. It's like, there's this hostile intent bias that he carries. And so
I
he
feel
thought that
that.
this big, yeah, he thought that this big kid was gonna, hurt his cousin who lives with us. And so he gave him his Halloween candy, you know. And I just, this society and where we've gotten to this point where people are showing up on folks' doors and, you know, taking advantage of others' dignity for laughs and clicks, like, it's just symptomatic of everything else that's going on. But the point is I stopped them in the neighborhood. I figured out who they were. And then after I was like, we've had boxes stolen. Like, white folks like complaining so much they invented Yelp and Nextdoor, right? So they'll go on Nextdoor and they'll be like, I'll shoot the next person that comes on my porch and steals a box, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, y'all are fooling around in here. We got a lot of trigger happy right wingers. You need to be careful. But when they drove away, I realized that they had footage of my son. Um, they've taken advantage of. They filmed, at my home, and they're going to get laughs out of my son, and it infuriated me. But I didn't want to go to the police. I
Yeah.
didn't want to go to the police, and because I was younger, I did a lot of stupid stuff when I was pranks, things, throwing water
Yeah.
balloons, you name it. And so I called the
We didn't
non-emergency line.
videotape everything
Yeah,
though.
yeah, exactly. Thank goodness. But so I go to the non-emergency line, and they say, do you want to do a report? I'm like, no, I don't want to do a report. I would just like to have an authority figure, talk to these kids before they get in worse trouble, before it escalates, right? And
Yeah.
so figured they were Auburn University students. Somebody got me in touch with the code of conduct folks just to make sure. I was like, maybe they'll get an email, just whatever. I just did not want to go to the cops.
Yeah.
But again, this system is designed to drop a hammer on someone.
Yeah. So you
And
want us
these
to go
were,
over and kick in their door and shoot them?
yeah, exactly. These are, and
No,
the
that
thing
is
is these are young white kids, right?
fine.
Had they
Okay.
been young black kids, it would have been a different conversation for me, because I would have been like, are y'all trying to get shot? Because these white folks in my neighborhood definitely want to shoot you. So please be careful. I don't want to see you get hurt. But like, we get people in the system. We drop hammers. In another time, in another place, I'm not talking to you on Zoom. I'm behind bars.
Yeah. I
I've
know
worked
for
in
sure.
prisons and told folks that. Yeah.
I know for certain that I would be in prison. I mean, just a few things were moved around a little bit.
Yeah, and this system is not, it was a great example of the shooting victim of the police in Huntsville. I think you may have posted about it, who were having a mental health crisis, right?
Yeah.
Um, they're
Crystal
not,
Ragland.
Yeah, Crystal Ragland. They're not trained to deal with that. When you have hammers to solve all your problems, everything's a nail.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you look up the actual percentages of what they actually work on all the time, it's like only 4% of the things they work on are actually violent crimes.
Right.
And they solve very little of the crimes.
2% is what I read, something like that.
And most of the convictions are like plea deals. So it's
Sure.
usually people in a bad spot accepting something that, I mean, that might be kind of fudged a little bit, you know?
Right.
I know I
Well,
have
I'm
a lot of
actually,
friends that, I mean, when they get caught up in the system, it was over something stupid and small, and it just escalates after a while. You know, when you feel like you can't get out of it, like you start not giving a shit anymore. You let it
exactly.
go. You just let it
What,
go. It's like, yeah, I guess maybe I am a bad person. Maybe I am just like a fucked up person. Yeah.
yeah, we internalize a lot of that stuff. And for me, I say it a lot. I was criming while white, right? Like when I was a kid and when I was doing all this stuff, and
Yeah.
that was the biggest factor of why I'm sitting here still talking to folks, because I worked in prison here in Alabama as a volunteer in an education program, and some of the most brilliant people I've ever met, I met in that education program.